Thank you, Alan, and good morning, everyone. My name is Shiza Rana Magar, and I am a rising junior at Haverford College. This summer, I've had the opportunity to work at Jobs First New York City as a Ladders for Leaders intern, and today I have the honor of introducing our keynote speakers. First, we have the Deputy Mayor for Strategic Initiatives, Sheena Wright. Sheena is a fearless and visionary leader with a deep care for advancing our community's needs. Prior to her appointment, Sheena served as the first female president and CEO of United Way, New York City, where she was dedicated to breaking down barriers and uplifting opportunities that improve the lives of low-income New Yorkers. Sheena was named #1 on City and State's New York's nonprofit Power 100 and listed in Crain's New York Businesses Notable Black Leaders and Executives. Our second speaker is Alison Omens. She is the Chief Strategy Officer at Just Capital. She is responsible for setting and implementing strategy to achieve mission impact for the organization. Alison was most recently advisor for private sector engagement to U.S. Secretary of Labor Tom Perez, where she managed the inclusive capitalism strategy for the Secretary with the White House. Alison is on the board of directors of Jobs First NYC. Deputy Mayor, I am inspired by your leadership, as well as your work in advancing our community's needs and supporting our youth. Thank you so much for joining us at this important convening. Alison, I pass the mic to you to get us started.
Thank you so much, Shiza. Thanks for the wonderful introduction. Deputy Mayor, I'm delighted and honored to be speaking with you today. And I know the whole community is really excited to hear from you. I wanted to start with just a really broad question. This year's conference is, it's Dream Up. It's about optimism and about the future. And I'd love to just hear your personal reflections and feelings about your personal journey, as well as the journey of this administration and where we're going to see you all going when it comes to the future of young people, and what what you feel optimistic about, and sort of your own reflections about where where we've been, where we're heading, and where you hope the administration will really take us, and young people in particular. And we're muted. You're muted.
One day we're going to be able to.
In another 5 years. By the
yes,
next
another
pandemic.
5 years. We're going to figure it out. But thank you so much, Alison, and thank you so much, Jobs First, for just the incredible work that you do. It was so great just to look at the chat and see all the people who are here, so many friends and colleagues, and certainly that gives me hope and just excitement. I, like many of the people that are currently in leadership roles in the administration and just working across government, I'm from New York City. I remember when, as Alan was saying, in 2007, when Jobs First was started, like where we were, right, also on the brink of the Great Recession and all the things. And, I grew up in New York in the 70s and in the 80s and in the 90s, et cetera. And, and my journey is a manifestation of hope and expectation, and really about kind of like things that people might not expect in terms of the journey and the opportunities. So I have a fundamental belief in what is possible. I was born and raised in the South Bronx, teenage mom, unfortunately didn't have a lot of good educational opportunities in my community, got educational opportunities, unfortunately, outside of my community, quite frankly. And it was access to opportunity that enabled, the full realization of potential. And I think this administration understands that we don't have an achievement problem, right? It's not an achievement gap, it's an opportunity gap. And because people have lived experience, people grew up in NYCHA, her family in NYCHA, came from Brownsville, came from the South Bronx, Southeast Queens, went through the public school system. And are where they are, right? Whether it's the police commissioner or the chancellor or commissioners across agencies, they appreciate the possibility and want to, and are in their seats because they want to absolutely make sure that the communities that they came from, all of those young people that Jobs First is focused on and leaning into, have those same opportunities. So I have a lot of hope. I majored in history in college. And so kind of looking back to the 1918 flu pandemic, And then we came out to the roaring 20s, where we had this explosion of creativity and interesting kind of opportunities. And there was an energy. And I think how we catalyze this energy coming out of a very, very, very difficult time. How do we learn the lessons? And I think one of the things that Alan said is all sectors are looking at things differently, right? All sectors are thinking about equity differently, whether it's the philanthropic sector, the corporate community, the government, because we can't look away from what we saw during COVID in terms of the inequities and the lack of access to opportunity. So I think that clarity, the realization, the lived experience, the energy, all of it gives me a lot of hope in terms of what we can do together.
It's great. And I so appreciate you calling out both the clarity and the urgency of the moment. I know that so many of us feel both just sort of seeing where we and have been the last couple of years, as well as feeling, that we need to be using this urgency and sort of the North Star of really ensuring that we achieve real impact. And so I would love to just drill a little bit further down and hear both, in your role as deputy mayor and as the Adams administration, what you're thinking about for really leveraging that energy into outcomes for young people in New York.
Absolutely. And I think, coming in the door, really critically appreciating that we had to be very precise and focused on moving the needle meaningfully and measurably for certain communities and certainly young people and young adults. So coming in the door, we knew that summer youth employment was going to be incredibly important. And I mean, advocates for years and years and years and years have been saying we need to increase, we need to baseline. This is like fundamental, basic opportunity, right? Access to opportunity, that's so important. And we did it, 25% increase, 100,000 slots, and baselined and improved it, right? Said not only are we going to ensure that you have a good opportunity, we've had a dramatic increase in private employers, small businesses, young people are getting financial literacy, they're getting wellness opportunities and access to training on their personal wellness as well, and exposure. Because when we talk about dreaming, your imagination has to be rooted in your experience and your exposure as well. And so in addition to working at these jobs over the summer, they're going to the UN, they're going to be going to, the stock exchange, and just having other experiences and opportunities that expose them to bigger things. So things like that, 110,000 summer rising. We are focused on opportunities for young people who are justice involved, who live in NYCHA housing, just being very, again, precise and pointing resources in the direction where they're most needed, and making sure that there's more equitable access to opportunity. Our child care plan, appreciating that, you've got to start at the beginning. It's going to touch 41,000 young people and their families over the next 2 years at least. So just really coming in with some laser focused on certain neighborhoods and communities, cohorts of young people to solve problems. I think the last thing I'll say is that across government, everything is really laser focused on results, laser focused on outcomes. So our chancellor, as he's looking at the New York City public school system, they're looking at the fact that 80,000 young people could start high school and only 18% of them get a bachelor's degree at the end of a 6-year journey of trying to achieve a bachelor's degree. And so how do we move the needle there, but also recognize that you've got to get young people, there have to be other pathways to careers as well. We have a chancellor at CUNY, similarly, that looks at the life outcomes of young people that go through the CUNY system in terms of their livable wages. And so everybody's focused on moving the needle in meaningfully and measurable ways.
Thank you for that. And I do want to dig into that a little bit. I also just want to invite / remind all of our folks on the Zoom that happy to bring in questions that you all have for the deputy mayor as well. So please do be thinking about those questions. So I'm not out here on my own, but I could talk for hours. So so deputy mayor, just to dig into that a little bit more, you know, I have a little bit of experience in federal government, and one of the things that always struck me was the need to sort of work both across government agencies as well as across sectors to really be ensuring, as you said, those results. And I know that, you know, as part of that, I imagine, I don't want to speak for you, but I imagine your role sort of being at that particular perch of strategic initiatives is about ensuring that education, workforce, economic mobility are all sort of centering equity, young people, those outcomes. And so I'd love to just hear more from you of how you're pulling those various strings to ensure that that young people sort of are, you know, continue to be both thought of depending on the agencies, but also that we sort of don't lose sight of the connection points between education, workforce, sort of summer employment, but then opportunity and mobility to jobs. So just talk a little bit more about how you're thinking about that.
No, absolutely. You know, we know and believe, right, in a whole person approach, and fundamentally believe that you can't get anything done unless it is really collaborative and aligned in terms of how we're acting, whether it's in government or across sectors. So we start out with a vision and a goal, and that vision is informed not only by people in the administration or across various sectors, but people with lived experience. I'm really excited that we came into this administration with the largest public policy survey that's ever been done in the city of New York. 63,000 people responded, including 18,000 young people, in terms of these are the issues, the challenges, and these are some things that we think would be helpful as solutions. So really grounding that data, those goals, and then deeply appreciating that trying to accomplish one thing cuts across many agencies and sectors. So for example, when we did our childcare plan, there are like 10 agencies that need to work on that across 3 deputy mayor portfolios: the deputy mayor of economic and workforce development. It's an economic development imperative, it's workforce, small business, the deputy mayor of health and human services, when you talk about ACS and HRA and the Department of Health, the Department of Education. This was many agencies that had to come together and say, how do we create a system for 0 to 5, for example? And what Deputy Mayor Williams-Isom always says is that we can't talk about children in the absence of a family. We can't talk about young people and pretend that they exist on an island unto themselves and not understand the ecosystem of family and community that's around them. So our approaches have to be focused on that. So even that's just one part, that's just government. But we also appreciate, and I think, again, many of us from our own professional experiences, that government can't get much done without the nonprofit sector, right? The nonprofits are core partners to our work, have to be at the table in terms of the co-planning, but also the execution. And we have to treat our nonprofits like partners, not vendors. It's not a transaction, it's a real partnership. So one of the things that we're doing as well is trying to respect the partnership. Make sure that nonprofits are paid on time. That's a part of the work that I'm doing in partnership with Deputy Mayor Williams-Isom, making sure that we actually create a nonprofit office that helps to cut through the bureaucracy and provides services and supports for the nonprofit sector so that there's a better engagement and partnership with government. And then lastly, the last sector is the corporate sector and the philanthropic sector. They're the employers, right? They're key drivers to anything we're trying to do with young people. So we've got to work in concert, in partnership, as well as with philanthropy. So the strategic initiatives portfolio recognizes that it is this cross-sector, cross-agency collaborative planning and action that's actually going to get us to the goals that we seek for our communities, for our young people, and for this administration.
That's great to hear. Several of the questions I had for you were around reducing silos, reducing barriers, both for, as you said, employers, nonprofits. I've noticed that we have a number of folks from the workforce system as well on the line, and I do think that it does go back to this broader challenge I think that we have across sectors is there's often sort of this redundant work or lack of collaboration. And I often think of the role of government and the role of a mayoral administration is really to be ensuring that there's extreme collaboration with specific goals in mind. So it really does, I think, resonate for me as well as the audience when it comes to how do we really ensure that our goals associated with better outcomes for young people, sort of both in the short term as well as in the long term, deliver and sort of grow into what they need, what we know that young people really need.
Absolutely. And I think you think about workforce. Deputy Mayor Maria Torres Springer and her team really kind of walked in and appreciated at the outset that workforce development initiatives exist across 21 different agencies in the city of New York, right? And then there are hundreds of nonprofits. There's a philanthropic sector, and then you have all the employers, right? It is one of the most fractured, siloed ecosystems that exist. And the goal and the future of work that is being led by Deputy Mayor Torres Springer and team and across government is that collaborative plan, aligned action, and just the infrastructure of breaking down those silos. And we're starting to do it here just internally in government, whether it's across the DOE or the Mayor's Office of Youth Employment or DYCD or the Workforce Development Unit, and really bring everybody to the table. And I think the silo breaking and the, as you said, the impetus, the drive of government to really be focused on that. And that's one of the things that Mayor Adams has said over and over and over and over again. The dysfunctionality, one of the roots of that is everybody working in a silo. He uses the great example that the Department of Education feeds kids, bad food that the Department of Health has to then manage in terms of obesity and health outcomes. You can say that about a lot of things, and particularly around the workforce issues and challenges and silos that we have. But so you got to name it, and we've named it, and then you have to really have it as a goal to tackle, not feel overwhelmed by it, like, oh, this is the way it's been. It's very difficult. It's very challenging, and one of the ways to move toward is changing people's mindset. When people get in a room and share what they're doing, and they see opportunities for leverage. They see opportunities for their work to accelerate and their ability to improve outcomes for the work that they're contributing to. You get buy-in. When you enable people and bring people to the table to co-create with you together, that builds a muscle that can be very powerful to breaking those silos.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we all appreciate that sort of need for institutional muscle. So appreciate you calling that out. Let's just talk about centering equity, both in nonprofits as well as this broader goal. Obviously, when we're talking about young people, we're often talking about young people of color, low income folks. And so would love to hear from you how you and the Adams administration are thinking about equity and resource allocation for communities, nonprofits, organizations, and how you're really tracking this and ensuring that remains really center and understood and sort of that North Star throughout the work.
Absolutely. It is an important and humbling fact that Mayor Adams is the second mayor of color in the history of the city of New York. And it is an important fact that many of the leadership, whether it's the deputy mayors or commissioners, are also people of color, diverse, immigrant backgrounds. So that's people are coming to this seat with a perspective and also a sense of responsibility. So we've created, the first ever in New York City, a mayor's office of equity, because we all know and fundamentally believe that at the end of this administration, if the needle hasn't moved again for specific populations and specific communities, then we will not have succeeded in our role here. So what we're focused on in the mayor's office of equity is just being very intentional and precise about equitably making sure that opportunities exist. What was interesting, even in the last administration during the pandemic, is that there were people that came together across different agencies and said, COVID is devastating communities of color, low-income communities, just so disproportionately. I mean, there's always like this hum of inequity that we've experienced, but like COVID was like, boom, like, come on, like, this is crazy. X times number, et cetera, et cetera. And people came across the administration and said, you know what, we've got to lean into this. And there was so much great groundwork that was done. The Task Force for Racial Equity and Inclusion that looked at 33 specific neighborhoods that really were cut off from opportunity and said, we are going to direct resources very intentionally to those communities. It was a COVID response, but we're carrying that forward. So it's not just about geography, right? We know there are disparities within the disparities. We know that, the Asian community is a big community, but there are certain sub segments of that community that have certain challenges and issues in terms of access to opportunity. We want to look at gender across different communities as well, because we know what's happening with Black women and their maternal health or infant mortality is just outsized different. And so kind of really zeroing in and making sure that we are very intentional about what we're doing to remove those opportunities, barriers, and really challenge those disparities is really what we're focused on. And that mayor's office that really sits and really looks across the administration is focused on that.
Well, thank you so much. I think we have to leave it here, unfortunately, but so appreciate your leadership, the Adams administration, Mayor Adams, and the throughout on these topics: equity, mobility, opportunity, particularly for young people. There's so much to be done. I know we're gonna have a really interesting conversation today, but again, thank you for your leadership and sharing your insights into what the administration is focused on and how you're centering young people.
Thank you so much, Alison. And thank you so much to Jobs First and just all the participants. I mean, when I look in the chat and I see who was all on here, this is all the talent and skill and expertise and passion and wisdom that we need. We can solve these problems. And I'm so honored and excited to be in the company of such great people. And thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And with that, I will turn it over to Carrie Fallhaber, who will take us into our first panel.